Busi, hi. I'm just waiting for Kurt to connect to YouTube and then we'll give you the go ahead.
Thank you, Pam.
We can start now, Busi.
Professor is opening.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Nobuhle Hlongwa. I'm the Dean and the Head of the School of Art in the College of Humanities at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Welcome to our Imbokodo webinar this morning. Our theme for today is Loving Your Imposter for Women in Education, Leadership, and Academia. In opening our webinar this morning, I would like to welcome the Director of HRD, Ms. Busi Ramabusi, to give us the official welcome. Thank you very much, Busi. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Nobuhle. Greetings to all of you colleagues and welcome to this signature workshop on Loving Your Imposter. I would also like to greet the colleagues from Imbokodo and all of you who have joined us this morning. But before I proceed, I think it's proper for me to start by congratulating Professor Hlongwa, who this week received the news of her promotion to full professor. Congratulations to you, Prof. We can give her a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Busi.
It is indeed a well-deserved and long overdue promotion. And then, of course, a special welcome to our guest speaker, whom I'm very excited to have here today at UKZN. A very special virtual welcome to you, Rita, Ms. Rita Clifton. So just to give a bit of background, Imbokodo has been doing a lot of work in terms of advancing issues of women at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. We focus on capacitation, we focus on development, we focus on creating opportunities for shared learning. And of course, in the past 2 years, we've been focusing mostly on the impact of COVID-19 on women. We do know that women were more impacted than men in terms of COVID-19. And so we've been focusing on more internal work, as well as prioritizing the well-being, as many of you have been following some of our webinars and workshops. So just to quickly say also that Imbokodo is acutely aware that women at UKZN are very accomplished, and many of them do excellent work. However, we also are aware that more often than not, women at UKZN sometimes are hesitant to put themselves up for promotion, even when people around them can see the evidence of readiness. We do know that most of the women in the academic sector are sitting at lecturer level or senior lecturer level or junior management. And we do know also that UKZN management is still very much predominantly male. We do know from research that it has been said that women tend to wait until they meet 100% of the requirements before they put themselves up, whereas their counterparts put themselves up only at 60% of the requirements being met. And we do know that this could be partially because of the imposter syndrome. And so hence today we decided to tackle this issue head on. We do know that many of the professionals experience this. However, it's something that is sort of taboo to talk about. So we're very excited to actually come across Rita's work on this subject, because then it enables us as women, and of course as men, because it's not only a women's issue, but it has been said that somehow women tend to experience more. So we are very excited to have Rita, who has even written a book on this subject and has her own experience to share, to help us at UKZN, as women at UKZN, to identify our own imposter and capitalize on it, to pursue the opportunities that exist in our careers within UKZN, and of course, making a wider impact nationally and internationally. So therefore, with these words, I would like to welcome all of you and hope that you learn something new about yourself and you learn how to embrace the vulnerability that comes with the imposter. With those words, welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Busi, for the welcome. We now feel welcome, and Rita, a warm welcome once again to you today. Colleagues, I think at this time, I think it is proper that I now formally introduce our guest speaker for today, Ms. Rita Clifton. Rita has been called the doyen of branding by Campaign Magazine and the fabulous ambassador for business by Retail Week. She is a company chair and portfolio non-executive director, as well as being a speaker, writer, a practitioner in brand strategy and business leadership. She's a current board. Current board roles include John Lewis Partnership, Nationwide Building Society, Essential PLC. Past roles have included the global online fashion retailer ASOS PLC, Cuba, and as a non-executive chair of Populous Group. Non-profit board roles have included Green Alliance, the WWF, which is the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the Sustainable Development Commission, and as chair of the leading sustainability organization forum for the future. Rita has achieved a lot, colleagues. She became the visiting fellow at Said Business School, that is Oxford University, in 2019, and is also a board mentor and advisor. Rita's early career was in advertising, becoming vice chair and strategy director at Saatchi & Saatchi. She then moved to brand consultancy as London CEO at Interbrand, and later became chairman for a 10-year term. She has worked with many of the leading organizations around the world, as well as startups and growth stage businesses of all shapes and sizes. In 2013, she co-founded the global consultancy brand Cap, which she later sold onto the management group. She received a CBE in the Queen's New Year Honours List in 2014. That is quite an achievement. Rita is a regular columnist and a commentator, including for the CNN, BBC, Sky, and social channels, and was a business mentor and judge on the CNBC award-winning TV series Pop-Up Startup. Her writing has included the best-selling book, The Future of Brands, and 2 editions of The Economist book, Brands and Branding. Her new book, Love Your Imposter, is about new types of business leadership and has had some exceptional reviews. With these few words of welcoming Rita, I will now hand over to Rita. Thank you very much, Rita. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much for that fantastic introduction. You can imagine that, you know, when people list out the things that you've done in your career, I mean, it both feels incredibly flattering, and also sometimes it feels like it's talking about someone else. as opposed to you. And I'm often asked to speak on things like journey to chief executive and things like that, as though somehow at the age of 7, I knew that I wanted to go and run a corporation. But of course, you know, my career, honestly, has come as a bit of a surprise to me. And I have to say, it's come, I think, as probably more of a surprise to my director of studies at university. So over the years, occasionally she's written me notes, encouraging notes. I mean, she is now over 100 years old. She is extraordinary, with a curiosity and an intellect that I think has really sort of powered her through all of these years. But in the introduction, it was mentioned that I received an honour. It was an amazing day, an honour from Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. And one of the best things was my mother was only 10 steps away, and it was the experience of her life. But having had this honour, I then actually got a little note from my director of studies from all those years ago at university, where she said, many congratulations, and I've watched your career with great interest and some surprise. So there we are. It's one of those things that even at the height of thinking, gosh, this is fantastic, you know, from time to time, it's good to remind yourself that actually, you know, you've come on a journey and it hasn't been very smooth. And also there was never a moment in my early career where I thought that I would do anything really of the things that I've done, because honestly, the imposter syndrome has been, or my own imposter has been, my almost constant companion throughout my years. So I'm very happy and delighted to be talking to you today. We are going to be talking about imposter syndrome, and as I said in the introduction, this is an incredibly common feeling. You know, do I deserve to be here? You know, can I? Do I know enough? Have I achieved enough? And as we know, slightly more women tend to experience this than men, although actually it is pretty gender neutral and for very, very different reasons. So today is going to be a little bit about sharing experiences, you know, sharing some of the tools and tips, etc., that I've found useful sometimes in the course of my working life. And it would be very good to try and, you know, talk about those today. Now, I mentioned that I did a book, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But the reason I did the book is because I had some coaching a few years ago from someone excellent and very clear thinking and straight talking. And what I've discovered through that coaching is actually a new sense of purpose. And I'll be completely frank, my real sense of purpose is I want to get a lot more very different types of people leading organizations of all kinds. And that's in terms of gender balance and also in terms of broader diversity. At the moment, you might have seen the statistics, but 95% of the global institutions are run by men. 93% of the nations of the world are run by men. About 96% of the world's biggest corporations are also run by men. And as someone said, Sheryl Sandberg, who wrote the book Lean In from Facebook, she said, and it doesn't seem to be going that well. So what I'm saying is we want a very different kind of leader, very human leader, flaws and all, because after all, we are all very human. We all have our flaws. And what I'm saying in this book, and I hope in this conversation, that actually having human flaws, having vulnerabilities is not a weakness, it is a strength, because it enables you to connect with other people and other human beings with empathy and with understanding. And frankly, that kind of empathy and understanding is fantastically good, not only in building relationships with colleagues, in organizations, in departments and everything else, but also actually good for the world at large as well. So thank you for joining me in this conversation, and we're going to be having polls and conversations in table and feeding back, etc. But if you want to put your camera on, please do so. What I will do at the end of some of the breakout sessions is just ask someone from one of the tables or a few of the tables just to share some of the conversations that you might have, but I'll come on to that in just a moment. What I'm going to do now is to share my screen. I'm going to, yes, share my screen, there we are. I hope this is going to work. No, I'll go back. I just need to go back to the beginning again. Sorry. My screen is not, I'm just going to stop sharing for 1 second. And I don't quite know why. Oh, there we are. Got it. Right. Escape. Sorry about that. The best laid plans. I'm going to share the screen, I hope properly this time. There we are. That one there. And on full screen. I hope that's appeared in the right places. So today I really want to talk about how to overcome imposter syndrome and be your best self. But that means being oneself and succeeding in the way that we would like to, as opposed to being some sort of third-party construct. I don't like the advice, fake it till you make it. I don't know whether you've heard that in other parts of your working and academic life. You know, somehow you've got to fake it. I don't like that. I actually think that encourages people to almost to think of themselves in the third party, almost like an inhuman avatar. I don't think that's what's needed in order to create very human leaders with, you know, human flaws and also vulnerabilities that can be very powerful. So I'm talking about how to overcome imposter syndrome. And as I said in the introduction, my book is called Love Your Imposter. Now, it was called Love Your Imposter because what I've found over the years is the advice about you need to fight your imposter, overcome your imposter, and things like that. In my view, this can be a waste of energy because actually, if you speak to a lot of people who experience imposter syndrome, they are often very high achieving people. And in some strange ways, they've actually found their imposter to be quite useful because the imposter can sometimes, you know, push you to stretch yourself, to try harder, to do more. And actually, for some people, that can be quite a useful drive. So I've come to terms with my imposter over the years because I've realized that sometimes when I've been very nervous about a new position or a presentation or a paper of something of that kind, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, it's not going to be good enough. Actually, that has encouraged me to rehearse more or to stretch myself more. So actually these days, I look over my shoulder and I go, I know you and I know why you're there. And actually you can help me do more. So that's I guess, you know, my own imposter. And I wanted to write the book to help people recognize this is such a common thing and actually is something that you could work with. But before we go any further, can I just ask for the first poll to be put up, which is actually just, you know, for people on this call, I'd like to know whether or not you personally have experienced imposter syndrome. So can we please put up the first of the polls? There's a ding dong going on. Right, okay, so if I can ask you then just to please mark which one you are feeling. So as every day or often or sometimes. Yeah. Any more? I'm hoping that, do please score. That's interesting. Someone has said never. Now that's interesting and actually quite unusual. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. But I guess look, it's settling here around often and sometimes, and slightly more people say they have it every day than never. So I think what this is confirming is again how common this is. So I think so 79 voted. That is great. 77. Terrific. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think we'll end a poll because that gives us okay, so sometimes it's most often and again it's settling somewhere in the middle. Thank you very much. Have we shared those results? Oh yeah, I think I've shared those results. So there we are. I think that just confirms some of the things that we've been talking about and saying. So thank you very much. We can take we'll take the poll down now and carry on. Okay. can I? Okay, can we take that off now? Stop sharing. Yeah. It seemed determined to stay there. Okay, got it. Thank you. Right. If I can move on now. We've had the poll. So if you were one of those people, one of the many people who said that they do experience it from time to time, you're in very good company. Michelle Obama, Emma Watson, Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks, Olivia Colman, who played the Queen. I don't know if anyone has seen the series The Crown. She's an award-winning actress, and she talks about every time she goes on set, she thinks she's going to get fired. But that actually helps her practice more, rehearse more, and everything else. And actually even successful business people talk about imposter syndrome. I mentioned Sheryl Sandberg. Hillary Clinton, who very kindly did a testimonial for my book, she talked about when she first went to Columbia, in her early days as a student. She looked around and said, all these women are going to be much smarter than me. And actually she found that that was quite a good sort of incentive to work harder and develop herself too. So if you do experience this syndrome, you are in very good company. And if you look at a more, I guess, academic definition of imposter syndrome, it's this. It can be defined as a collection of feelings of inadequacy that persist despite evident success. And what was interesting is you may have seen or read that actually imposter syndrome was something that was identified in the 1970s by a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, who was being asked to treat a variety of women who came to them talking about how they might have been successful, but they didn't feel that way. And also they didn't feel as though they deserved their success. So it was first of all used in terms of women's feelings. But over the years, wave after wave of studies with scientists and academics, students, high achievers, what that has shown is actually this is a very common thing across both men and women, but women tend to experience it in about 18% more cases than men do. And also women tend to find it easier to share those feelings. Men find it more difficult to share and actually can experience and suffer in slightly different ways. So I think that's an interesting thing in its own right. And as I mentioned, Hillary Clinton very kindly did a testimonial on my book, which was about just this. And when I think about loving your imposter, and I was explaining the premise of my book to someone who happened to be a martial arts expert, a judo expert. What are the chances of that? I do not know one end of a judo mat from another. But when I was explaining this syndrome to them, they said, this is a little bit like judo, where you don't win by trying to beat your opponent. Actually, you win by using their own weight to help you win. So I thought that was a really interesting analogy, that actually you can use the weight of your imposter feelings to help you win and to help you develop yourself and also get to the top of running organizations too. And by the way, when we're busy beating ourselves up or thinking, oh, am I good enough, maybe I should step aside for someone who knows what they're doing. I've had those feelings. To me, my imposter syndrome is about, can I do this? The voice saying, maybe you should step aside for someone who really knows what they're doing. Can you do this, etc. But I really was intrigued by this thing I'm sharing here, which is actually the most effective leaders tend to underrate themselves. So actually, those who feel very confident in their abilities and who overrate themselves have an inverse relationship with their success. Whereas often people who underrate themselves most actually tend to be even more successful. And that feels like a very interesting correlation with, again, imposter feelings, because they do tend to be attached to people who are high achievers, who do want to achieve more, and actually are never satisfied. And also hello. Okay, if people could go on mute unless you'd like me to answer. So what I'd like to do now is go into breakout groups where, if you could please share in the table discussions just about when did you first experience imposter syndrome. Again, I'm reading that most people on this call have experienced it. When did you first experience it? I certainly experienced it first of all at university, where I was looking around. I came from quite a humble background, and I went to university and saw these very smart people with very smart cars who went to very smart schools, and I was thinking I'm never going to be accepted. But again, that made me try harder. Hillary Clinton talked about Columbia. So when did you first experience imposter syndrome? And actually, has there been a moment where it's even perhaps unexpectedly been quite helpful? You know, that judo analogy that you thought, oh my God, I couldn't do it, I can't do it. But actually, in some ways, it had the effect of stretching you, or making you rehearse or practice or correct, do more on a paper, a lecture or whatever. So it would be great just to have those. So could we go into the breakout groups now, please, and just have so when did you first experience it, and where has it even been unexpectedly helpful? And then we'll come back and I'll just ask one or two people to feedback on the discussions. So could we go into the breakout groups now? I think we're breaking people into random groups, yeah? Is magic going to happen? I'm hoping that something will happen here. I'll stop screen sharing for a moment. Can I just check that people are going into, that there are 50 unassigned participants at the moment? Okay. Could someone maybe, I'm looking at the chat at the moment, if someone could just let me know if there's a technical hitch about breakouts. Okay. What I might do,
it actually looks like colleagues need to join the room, so they would have received a pop-up.
Oh, okay.
So please just click on the pop-up and join the breakout room.
Okay. Click on the pop-up and join the breakout group.
Okay.
Is that happening?
Why does it say we'll close in 44 seconds? Musa, try and assist us.
So people saying they haven't received a pop-up yet.
Okay, this is tricky.
My one has returned me back to the main room.
Okay. Okay. Well,
maybe let's. Musa is busy trying to do something. I can see here at the background, but
okay. Maybe I could ask someone. Maybe I could ask actually someone on the call who might be happy to turn the camera on, just share maybe some of their experiences. Can we stay here? Okay. Could I ask then someone, I'm going to put on gallery view, if you wouldn't mind a few people turning cameras on, just to maybe talk a little bit about when you first experienced imposter syndrome yourself, and also when you've found that it might have been helpful. Is anyone happy to speak on that one? Hello.
Hi, Evita.
Hello.
Hi. I think I'm going to kick it off because I'm concurrently on a conference with the Association for Applied and Clinical Sociology, and one of our keynote addresses earlier on was on imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And I think this session is being broadcast live on YouTube, and that was the reason for the breakaway rooms. But there's a hesitancy to talk about it. You know, the poll was quite interesting, and I'm quite envious of the person that says they never experience it, great for them, and the confidence levels. But I think imposter syndrome is socially constructed. So let's get to the reality experiences of it. I'm one of those, and I want to be completely transparent. I'm one of those that experience it consistently, constantly second guessing myself. And something you said resonated with me. I mean, even at the time when I submitted my PhD, I was going through an electronic copy, and I thought, oh my God, the examiners are going to think, who is this woman trying to submit this for a PhD? Constantly second guessing myself. I think images, the media, everything around us tells us we've got to be those perfect mothers, partners. We have to achieve success, professional success. We have to do all of these things, but the system works against us. The statistics show us that as women, we have to work twice as hard. So I experience it daily. I've published, I've received grants, and I've ticked all the boxes in my field. Yet I still feel like it's not enough, or it's all going to just blow up.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
And that
yeah.
creates another problem. Sorry, the last thing, that creates another problem because it pushes you to work harder, and then there's other things that emerge like burnout and role overload, and but it's real. Help us fix it.
Yes, indeed, it certainly is. So I think that what I will say, and I'll carry on sharing it in just a moment. Rose, you've turned your camera on. Thank you for that. Are you happy to share some of your own thoughts and experiences?
I can't remember the first time, but now that I'm thinking about it, it has happened often. I've been working in the library for many years, and I think in the academic environment, the imposter syndrome is probably very strong because there's the sense of academic versus non-academic. Where you often say, well, we're the support staff. You're really the second-rate citizens. I remember one of our past DVCs saying we're the consumers, not the producers. So that all the time one is thinking, what can I do to prove myself within my own sphere? I have a right to, I have a right to be who I am, do the best that I can in my environment. Why should I worry about what other people think? And it is, and even with qualifications, it's still quite a tricky thing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
all the time, it's sitting there on the shoulder. Yes,
absolutely. Again, there's such common feelings, and thank you very much. There's a note in the chat. Michelle, would you like to share something? And Nokathula, Michelle, hello. Nokathula, are you happy to share?
Hi.
Hello.
Actually, my problem began when I finished my PhD. And I don't think I have recovered from that, even emotionally, never mind mentally. My problem began when I finished PhD. And then I came back to South Africa because I was studying abroad. I came back to start working in South Africa, trying to resettle in the country again is a mission on its own. But what really threw me off the bridge was that I had a PhD in this particular field. I'm a historian by profession.
Right.
But when I started working in South Africa, for years, I was thrown in a department, a foundation program that is not even an academic program. It was just a foundation program for students who were supposed to be prepared for the mainstream at the university. Then I was there for a good number of years, for about 4 or 5 years. Even there were certain experiences that didn't really make me feel comfortable at all. In each and every institution, there is politics. Each and every department or structure has got its own politics.
Yes.
And the politics made me even more uncomfortable working there.
Yes.
Then when I finally left that program, I joined the tourism program. I had to teach culture and heritage tourism. It was like doing a second PhD in tourism, because now I had to learn, I had to give myself at least 5 years to study tourism, to even understand what tourism is, and to be able not only to teach it, but also to even publish in that discipline. So that is what I've been doing in the last 7 years since I joined that program.
Thank you. And I guess, and also what you're describing is that you put so much effort in, so the feeling that you might not have known, or, might not have known that you put a huge effort in. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Rita, I don't even know how I feel right now. In fact, I think I'm still very numb, because I don't know whether I'm an academic in tourism. Am I still a historian? What exactly am I?
Now, in fact, in the next part of the conversation, I'm going to be talking about clarity, because that's very important. So thank you. I'll come back to that if I may. Thank you. I'm seeing some great stuff in the chat. There's someone saying, I'm always thinking, oh my gosh, someone's going to discover I'm a fraud, panic mode. I think many of us have had that too. And feelings of the same description, imposter on the shoulder, constant guilt about not being good enough, not working hard enough. I think I totally recognize that. I've heard it so often, and people saying, it's not good enough, I need to be better, my worst critic. Sinagugu, are you happy to share some of your experiences?
Thank you, Rita. You pronounced my name so correctly. Yeah, I don't know when exactly I started feeling it, but I know of a particular time when it got better of me. That was at the time when I was in one of the historically white universities, and I had to be the HOD. Now it was, I had to I have to prove myself all the time, right? And every little question made me think, it's not about the question, it's probably about me. So yeah, that's the, and it just made me to not just only self-doubt, but of course you work harder. And somebody mentioned the issues of burnout, because you're trying to prove yourself so much, you end up having burnout and a lot of other problems which normally you wouldn't feel. So that's when it got better of me. But even where I am right now, which is at UKZN, I still now and again feel it, probably because of where everybody knows everyone and everything. And now you have to, and again, coming into a position of power, now you have to constantly show that I may not know the institution and the institutional culture, but I know what I'm about, and I know what this is about all the time. It's draining. It's really draining. Thank you.
It is. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I think it's a really important thing about the draining thing. And I think when we talk about 70% of people experiencing imposter syndrome, for a minority, about 10% or so, it can turn into something that is debilitating, that actually would benefit from some professional help. And in the main, I'm talking about the 60% or so of people who are in that, I have those feelings from time to time. I think burnout is a really, really important element, and that's why getting your energy under control and using all these feelings as a positive drive is important, because the struggling thing is often the thing that I find tends to really affect people. So thank you very much for those stories. I love that. I'm my worst critic. I think we're all, we'd all recognize that too. So I think if nothing else, and thanks so much for sharing those stories, is I think we can confirm that this is not only a very common thing, but some of the stories and the themes, etc., are also very common too. And actually, if they're managed, they can have some positive impact. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to share my screen again now. I hope this is going to work. Yes, there we are. Okay, so we've done that one. I now want to just talk about what we can start to think about, what we can really start to do that might help these feelings. And actually, the clarity question came up before. Now, I spent a lot of my career, in brand strategy. And sometimes, obviously, you're talking about organizations. I work with many academic institutions, actually, on their brands. So at Cambridge, for example, I was on the Cambridge Business School Advisory Board for some time. And as we know, universities, they have to work hard to make sure they attract the best academics and brains and students and support staff and management teams and everything else. And actually, what I've found when you're working with, sort of company brands, corporate brands, and interesting organizations, there are some similar characteristics if you're going to apply it to yourself. And when I talk about personal branding, what I don't mean is the Kim Kardashianization of personal branding. That's at the other end of the spectrum. When you're talking about personal branding, the substance is the most important thing. But actually making sure that you are clear about how you are using your substance, your talents, and making sure that everything is coherent in a way that's going to help you be successful is important. And the three characteristics of really important organizations, as well as individuals, are these three. And clarity of what you stand for, clarity of your goals and your purpose is one of the most fundamentally important things, because frankly, if you're not clear about who you are, where you're going, what you want, what you're good at, what your strengths are, then other things will either be academic in the lateral sense, or otherwise less effective if you would like to end up running teams, organizations, or whatever. And again, I'll say this very openly. When I'm speaking to people and they say, we need more women to be in charge, we need more women to be running things, we need more women to be doing this, I go, absolutely, that's right. And if you've got the ability, you're the woman. So, in many ways, I'm trying to encourage people to be the change they want to see, and also put themselves forward, because many, many more people are capable of leading conversations, organizations, academic institutions. Many more people are capable of doing that. Many more women are capable of doing that than may currently think they are able to. But being clear about your strengths and some of your ambitions. I mean, one of my ambitions, I want to make the business world more human. And as part of that, I want to make sure many, many more women end up running organizations, because we need a different chemical balance at the top of organizations. At the moment, it's far too skewed, and that's not human, and it's not healthy for engaging, our broader populations in society and reflecting the society that we live in. So clarity of what you stand for is really important. And then, of course, you need to make whatever you want to do, you need to make sure you've got the skills and the experience and the way of communicating and presenting that actually is coherent with your purpose and goals. And then finally, about leadership, that's really about you lead your own self, if you like. You lead your own personal brand, personal profile, and staying nosy and staying curious to learn is a very important part of that energy, that leadership energy. Just to make sure that you are constantly keeping yourself up to date, open-minded about technology, about human beings. I make a joke out of the fact that I've made a living out of being nosy about people. I'm so interested in how people tick, and I want to help people make the very most of themselves. And in my view, if you don't want to help other people be brilliant, you don't have the right to call yourself a leader. So I think it's really important that actually we use our humanity and our experiences to help other people be all they can be. And on the clarity front, I want to focus on that for it. There's a very, very important thing that came up here. I think the question to everyone on this call is, how well do you know yourself and your strengths? There are many different tools these days. So I'm just sharing a few here. So for example, high five, that will show you, if you complete the questionnaire, what your 5 key sort of strong characteristics are. I happen to be a strategist. I don't think actually that this is actually my colleagues' strengths rather than my own. Mine looks slightly different from this. The one in the middle is about career anchors. That was a really interesting study and questionnaire I filled in about which things do you need to spend most of your time doing to make sure that you are happiest. And some people want to understand themselves by more psychological help. There is something called the Landmark Forum that some people love, some people hate. There are many, many personal and self-development courses and programs where actually you can get to understand yourself better. Again, what makes you tick. And the reason why this is so important is not only to make sure you really understand your strengths and how you can make the most of your strengths, but it also helps you understand what might be holding you back. We've all had experiences from our childhood or education, relationships and things like that, but really understand yourself, because if you understand yourself, you can look at yourself and go, actually, do you know, I could be better at that. I could improve that or develop that about myself. Or otherwise, I can look into some of the aspects that make me lose confidence, and I guess try to improve the way one feels about that too. So I think it's very important to do work on oneself to understand what it is that drives you. Very important. And I'll say, sometimes the clarity, I thought, when I first became chief executive, for example, that I needed to behave in a certain way. I was having photographs taken, looking over my shoulder, arms crossed, because I thought that's what chief executives do, and they sort of kicked people's butts, and and it didn't really suit me, honestly. It didn't really suit me, and I was pretending to be a sort of a particular kind of chief executive. And actually it made me rather miserable and a bit ill. What I actually discovered in the end from my strengths work about myself is that actually my real power was in nurturing people, nurturing talent. And so therefore, what I redefined myself as was actually a nurturing chief executive, not a kind of, not this sort of rather strange sort of, myth, butt kicking. So actually I built my leadership style on what was natural and strong for me, which is helping other people be brilliant. Now you might have your own particular power or strength or leadership style, but finding that in yourself and also finding the passion is really very important, and not being something that you're not. It's also very important to be clear about your purpose. I've shared my purpose with you about I want to make the business world more human, and I want to help many, many more women end up running organizations of all kinds, which is making sure that we have very human people in charge of organizations, as opposed to people who maybe sound like nervous corporate press releases or whatever, or trying to be something that they're not, or work on the command and control principle of management that doesn't tend to work in the modern day. More collaboration, more nurturing is actually a really good thing. But start with why, because if you're clear about your purpose, so for example, when I got clear about my purpose, that's what stimulated me to write the book and to share my experiences so that I could really help people. So I'm going to ask for the next poll to be put up now, which is on clarity. So if I can just ask for the questions to be put up and then ask people to fill those in, which is really asking about how clear you are. I'm hoping that this poll will come up on the screen. Absolutely. So just to ask, how clear are you about your strengths, your purpose, and your goals? So are you completely clear, fairly clear, not very clear, and frankly, I just don't have any idea? That's great. That's very interesting. Clearly about strengths and purpose, goals, etc. It's really good to have the responses here. I can see that the percentage of voting is going up. Okay, any more who'd like to respond to that? How clear are you about your strengths, your purpose, and your goals? Okay, great stuff. We've just got another few seconds to go on that. So I think what I'm going to conclude then is actually people on the call are sort of fairly clear about what they are hoping. I'm going to end the poll now. So people are fairly clear about what their strengths and goals are. I might just ask people to share that in just a moment. We will ideally go into breakout rooms just to have a quick conversation about that. So so I guess that there's a fairly clear, so that's a very, very good start, and some are completely clear. So could I then ask that we go into the breakout room now? I'm just going to share those results. I think that they have been shared. So fairly clear, which is a really, really good start, but obviously some people feel not feeling very clear at all. And it'd be very nice to move some people up into the top section here. So can I just ask you then, I think we are able to go into breakout rooms this time, just to have a conversation around the table, about how would you describe your own purpose? I've described mine. What are your short and longer term goals? Are you clear?
Hi, colleagues, just checking if you did get the instructions. Sorry, we're having a bit of a technical issue with the breakout rooms, but I hope you did get the instructions.
Yes, I did, thank you. I'm just not terribly into breakout rooms.
Yeah, so let's give it a few minutes and then we can start. A few seconds, actually.
What happened? Have the breakout rooms not been cancelled?
It has just brought me back here. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, we were about to have an exciting conversation.
we had started in our group, and then all of a sudden,
Ended too
back
soon.
here.
Well, I know what you mean. I was in a breakout group as well, and we were just about to have an exciting conversation. So actually, maybe we can have a sort of broad-ranging, exciting conversation. I wonder if someone would be happy to share. Certainly, in my group, we had Rose. Did you? I'm just checking who was in my team who was talking about starting off in her academic career. Who was that? Sorry, I can't find the name. Hello,
Robin Nicolay, I think.
Robin, are you happy just to talk a little bit about? Yes, hello, Robin. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about what you were saying about the clarity of your purpose.
I was saying that my purpose is sort of relatively short term at the moment, in that I'm new to academics. I've been in industry for a long time and decided academics was my route, and sort of trying to establish myself. After establishing myself in industry, I'm now trying to establish myself in academics. So that's my purpose at the moment, trying to get a name out there and experience.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. We also had someone talking about having a good retirement, for example. That was a purpose. And also someone was talking about sort of nurture, helping others. It's a really, really strong purpose. And actually that is a very recurrent theme about people developing a purpose where they really help others. And I'll come back to that in just a moment, because sometimes when people talk about their purpose being to help others, it can sometimes mean you might not step forward yourself, and I think that's just an interesting question maybe to come to. Would someone else be happy just to share what you did, either in either on the chat, or indeed actually if you went off mute? Is someone happy to share a sense of purpose? Maybe you've got a new sense of purpose from some of the recent thinking you've done on yourself. Anyone happy to come off?
Rita, Faith Magwaza shared in our group, in our session 4. Maybe Faith, would you please come in?
Hello, Faith. Oh, Faith, hello. Are you happy to share what you shared in your group? Or maybe we could just maybe you wouldn't mind just mentioning what it was that Faith shared.
Maybe if I could come in our session, Faith works in the library environment. So her purpose or her goal is to work a lot with young women and want to bring the best in them. So I even indicated to her that, like, Prof. Relebohile Moletsane will really love to work with her, because like with her research with rural women and children, so that's what she does most. So I think she wants to nurture women, especially in the space where she is working in, which is the library environment. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Thank you. Well, so nurturing has come up. Would anyone like to end up running an academic institution? It's a hard job, I know. Would anyone like to share that as a sense of purpose and how you might do it?
I believe you're not allowed to say that out aloud. I'm telling you what's going on in my head. It sounds like I would appear quite narcissistic if I said I would like to be a vice chancellor one day.
Yes, very good. I think that someone has said, not on your life, ending up running an institution. And actually all I'd say on that, ending up running a department or a team, or, obviously being a leading academic and practitioner and, nurturing people. I remember thinking, being being a chief executive was extremely stressful. I can't say I really enjoyed it. I will be honest about that. I couldn't say I really enjoyed it. However, what it did enable me to do was to create the culture that I really wanted, the positive business culture. I had an equal number of men and women on the executive team that created a real, sense of balance. We did a lot of personal development programs. We did yoga. I think we even had a choir actually at one point. And I say that because, even though it can be quite stressful running teams or departments or institutions or whatever, actually, you can really create the change that you want to see. So, so interesting sometimes in the chat saying, haha, I agree, never do that. But actually, I would maybe just encourage people to think about, if you want to help people, nurture people, set a culture and so on, actually being in the leadership position, as you know, even if it is a bit of a strain and also quite exhausting from time to time, you can actually create the kind of priorities and the kind of culture that are important. So I encourage many more people to put themselves forward if that is viable for you. Or it might be, again, just being an expert practitioner. So what I'm going to do is move on now to the, I'm going to move back on sharing screen to actually what I've found to be really helpful in terms of tools and tips and techniques in order to, again, progress as far as you might want to, either if that's helping other people or indeed if it's about developing yourself, or indeed a combination of the two. And I mentioned this clarity, coherence and leadership. So we talked a bit about clarity. So if what you want to do is to become an academic star, for example, or otherwise if you want to end up running an institution, if you just want to build your profile, if you're clear about what it is your strengths are, your goals are, what your special area of expertise is going to be, and it doesn't mean to say it's the only thing that you do, but being known for something is a really, really powerful thing, as we know. So if you're clear about strengths, the special something or your special skills, etc., and where you're going, I mean, short, medium and long-term goals, I'll confess that when I was working full-time and my children were small, my short-term goal was to stay awake sometimes. I think that my medium-term goals was I wanted to, end up being an expert practitioner in my craft, which happened to be, strategy, brand strategy, business strategy, both for organizations and also for people. But my longer-term goals, and I'll be quite honest with you, were about I want to save the world. That's why I have done, sustainability in the environment and things of that kind, because actually I want to make sure that, we can combine sustainability strategy into business and other organizations. And it'd be interesting to talk about some of the work that's been done in the academic sphere on that too. So if you're clear about what you want, what you stand for and where you'd like to go, you then of course need to make sure that what you do and the skills that you learn and develop are coherent with that. And then I'll come on to leadership. So I'm just going to share some of those coherent skills, because when we're talking about clarity, we then think about how does that show up in terms of the particular skills and specialisms I need to be developing or deepening or extending. How does that mean I should behave, and also some of the partnerships and relationships with maybe other institutions or other people, etc., that I should build. And also it's in terms of behavior, I mentioned about being a chief executive, I thought I needed to behave in a certain way, whereas actually when I was clear about the sort of leader I wanted to be, that dictated and that helped me think about my behavior, how I was going to nurture talent and the kind of personal development programs I was going to be encouraging people to do. But presentations and communication is a very important part, and learning how to do that in a way that fits with your own style is really important, and also gives you a lot of confidence in yourself. And sometimes people think that means, the superficial part. It's not. This was one of the original books on this topic, and if you look at the subtitle here, it says how to look, sound and behavior way to success. It's often the substance that really counts. And then, of course, the way that one presents oneself just does justice to that. That is all I'd say on that front. So when you're talking about your personal profile, your brand, your academic brand, or your management brand, or leadership brand, or whatever, then actually you need to think about what does that mean in terms of the sort of distinctive skills and specialisms. What does that mean I need to learn or to do, or people I might need to work with or associated with? What would that say about myself too? And also learning to be a great presenter and communicator. And the reason I talk about presentation and communication, I don't know if you recognize this person, but this is Pericles, who was the strategic leader, a general in ancient Greece, believe it or not, because I studied, a rather strange academic subject at university, of course, Latin and Greek. And I learned about Pericles. And what was really interesting about Pericles is that this was in the original Greek, ancient Greek democracy, in the sort of the birth of democracy, if you like. And what they discovered, of course, was that Pericles, even though it was a democracy, the power was in the hands of the person who was the best speaker, the best communicator. Now, I don't need to, I think, make too many examples of how many people who are world leaders have actually managed to raise their profile and get their way through being very strong communicators, some of which we may well not agree with. But what it does say is how important it is, if you want to be as sustainably influential as you can be, it's really good to learn to be a great communicator or a good communicator. And honestly, I used to hate presenting and communicating. I used to get so nervous, and if I held pieces of paper, they would shake, etc. But again, I think how to do this is really very important. And if you're a fan of Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a book called Outliers, it tried to look at how some people really succeeded in their professions or academia or sports or business or whatever. And what he discovered was that actually these people who were truly successful, outlier type successful, tended to do about 10,000 hours of practice. Now, that's quite a lot of practice. And if you hate public speaking, it'd be interesting to know whether or not people love public speaking or not. But if you hate it, it's good to keep on practicing it, because being a good communicator is a great way of making sure that you are as influential as you can be. And I show this because I'm speaking at a TEDx conference. I was very busy at the time. I didn't have a chance to prepare as I would want to. I wasn't used to speaking with one of these mics, one of these Madonna type stage mics, and I tried to use cards, cue cards. I don't know whether people on the call like using these things, but I was trying to use these for the first time, which was not a good idea when something that you're doing is being televised. So sadly, it was something, if people Google me presenting, this is one of the presentations that comes up. And honestly, it was one of the worst ones I'd done for some time, because I hadn't practiced and I was also nervous about doing this technique for the first time. On the right-hand side, actually, I got a lot more practice in speaking with the mic on stage, walking around, etc. So, one thing that was very funny on Imposter Syndrome, my daughter, who saw this picture of me on the big stage being tweeted, replied to me, "My mum is Steve Jobs, the previous CEO of Apple." Of course, he used to love appearing on big stages. So I think that was sort of a bit of my imposter syndrome there, with my daughter was trying to help and support me. But anyway, you can get a lot of practice, and also how to structure, speaking engagements or, lectures or, meetings, all sorts of types of speaking and presentation. It's really good to have a clear structure and make sure that you've got 3 points. I can remember 3 points, when you're making a speech or having a conversation or whatever. I think it's always good to think about what you're going to say to start off with. So learn the first few sentences, be really clear about what you want to say up front, and then of course you can develop the argument. And I say 3 because 3 is a magic number, 3 is a strong number, and frankly I can just about remember 3 points. You can then sort of expand them, but having a really clear structure is obviously extremely important. But the other thing just to bear in mind is that actually 55% of what gets communicated when you are speaking is through body language. 38% is through tone of voice, etc., and only 7% is actually the content. Now, these figures have been, differently proportioned in studies over time, but what it does say is it's incredibly important how you carry yourself, how you present yourself, that kind of sort of almost sort of controlling your body language. And what I found is really very helpful is that I was taught, number one is using steady eye contact when you're presenting to people to give a sense of authority and connection with people. And what they suggested is that you count 4 when you're looking at people in an audience, even a small audience or a big audience, you count to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. with steady eye contact, because if you look around the room, it makes you look nervous. I thought, that was a really good thing to do. I've learned how to lower my voice because actually, as you all know, women tend to have higher voices than men, which can create sometimes a challenge in getting heard. Now, you might have heard of Margaret Thatcher, who was a very high-profile prime minister in the United Kingdom. She wasn't always very popular, but what she was known for was, consciously lowering her voice. Now, it's a very interesting discussion, this, about whether or not this is something, for goodness sake, one should be doing. But it just recognises, how to make sure that you are communicating in a way that is strong. And sometimes, you can manage your voice. I got some voice coaching, for example, and many actors, they adapt their voice according to the parts that they're playing, and also the kind of characters that they might be wanting to present. So that sort of thing, steady breathing, posture, all of these things are very important. And a lot of personal development programs, they talk about how your posture becomes your psychology, your physiology becomes your psychology, and vice versa. I used to cross my legs over and sometimes do this or whatever. And actually I found that, a posture, breathing, deep breathing, all these things really helped with the sense of sort of control. So it's a really important thing to be a good presenter, etc. I think that it's really very important to give you confidence, particularly in terms of developing leadership or being influential. If you are going to sit around an organization's board table or participate in board level type discussions or present papers or work, to management boards and things of that kind, it's really useful to be able to understand finance and numbers. I was speaking to a leading academic, Professor Dame Mary Beard, who I knew very early in my career, and she is a very high profile academic. She has been published, she does a lot of broadcast, etc. Very well respected academic. And she herself feels that it's very important as an academic to really understand finance and numbers, because if you want more funding, you want to go for more funding, it's really important to know the numbers. And sometimes people have said to me, oh, I leave that to the bursar, I leave that to my agent or my manager or my business associate or whatever. And all I'd say there is that actually there are a lot of programs, whatever programs, that are rock stars who said, I just wanted to do the music, but they end up not having anything, or going drunk or whatever, because their agents ran off with the money, because of course they have the confidence to deal with figures. So I'm just saying, in passing, it's a good idea to try and learn the language of finance, and there are many ways of doing that, because if you're in charge of budgets and business, etc., and you can have that conversation with institutions about funding and how that's going to help the performance, the status, the prestige, etc., of that institution, it really can be very helpful and very important. And the other thing, of course, is that women tend to be less good at talking about money and pay and packages as men tend to be. And again, I've seen a lot of studies and also had many conversations about this. And I noticed that this happened to be figures from the United States, but I know from some of the research and studies that have been shared with me that this is very common all over the world, which is actually says that women and indeed people of colour make less money and have less job security. And I thought this is just such an interesting thing about why this would be the case, and also about how women make up 43% of full-time tenured or tenure-track faculty members, and yet actually it's much lower at a more senior level. And I think in part, having the confidence to talk about one's value in financial terms, as well as, of course, in qualitative terms, and having the confidence around that, I think is really very important. And also, the confidence to present and ask for what it is that you want, either in career terms and development terms, or indeed actually in academic terms. As far as building a profile and being known for expertise is concerned, then over the years, various roles, both in the commercial side, in my area of practitioner skill, which is it happens to be brand strategy, and also in the non-profit side when it comes to sustainable organizations or sustainable initiatives, so WWF, Conservation Volunteers, the carbon management program of BP. So I've done many things in my life, and the environment and sustainability was my extra thing. So I had my day job in business, but my extra passion and thing was actually in the environment. So my question to you is, do you have an extra thing in your working life, something that you feel particularly passionate about? It might well be academic subjects or a particular area of expertise, but I've always found having another string to your bow, just have an extra interest is a really, really powerful thing, because sometimes it enables you to get experience in organizations, on boards, for example, where you're giving your advice and your help for free, but you get experience of sitting around boardroom tables, which again can be very helpful if you want to end up running something, being as influential as you want to be, etc. So that has been quite helpful in my life. I think that the other thing to say is, and this is difficult for me, and I know it's difficult for many women and colleagues that I've come across over the years, but when I set up a personal profile to do speaking or writing and everything else, that actually a business colleague did a website for me. So I think that all I'd say here is that actually the thing I got known for was the brand thing, and I've applied that brand thinking to individuals as well as to organizations. And so therefore, my question, I guess, is, do you have an area of specialism? How will you build your profile on that? Whether or not you have a website, or whether or not you're publishing papers, making sure that they get shared, is a really important part of building a profile. But having a thing and having a focus and a specialism on which you build your profile is obviously very important. And of course, these days, I do speak, I do write. I've met David Attenborough as part of my extra thing on the environment, etc. But I've tried to, be quoted on, television or media, speak on platforms and everything else, because I found that has helped a profile. It obviously helps your influence, so that actually you can bring whatever you believe to more people and to be more effective and efficient that way. So we were going to do another breakout room, but I think that we've had a few challenges on breakout rooms. So I might just invite you just to think quietly, just for a minute or so, about those areas that you feel most confident about that I've just talked about. So presentation skills, building your profile, expertise, numbers, etc. Maybe just think a little bit for a moment. We'll go quiet just for a second, about which areas that you feel most confident about and least confident about. And actually any of those areas where you actually think, I could do with a bit of work to make sure that my skills and competencies and profile are coherent with what I'm trying to do. So I'll just invite you just to think about that for 1 second, if I may. We won't do breakouts. I just invite you to think about that. And maybe share some things in the chat as they occur. Just going through some of those things. I mean, anyone who felt I'd like to get more practice in presenting. I think I could be better at presenting, or I'm a very nervous presenter. Anyone feeling that oh, anyone feeling that about presenting at all? Anyone like to share that? Yes. So Michelle, thank you for sharing that. You feel nervous about presenting. Do you do a lot of practice? Are you happy to talk about that a little?
Sorry, I know it's better to have someone talking than just messages in the chat. No, so I don't know. For a long time, I was fine at presenting, and then I had a bit of a bad experience, I guess, or maybe I just overthought it. And then from then on, it's become worse, and I think it's become kind of a mental issue.
Right.
And actually, I don't like practicing too much, because I find sometimes when I practice too much, then I get too fixed on what I want to say instead of just letting myself flow. Because I'm you know, some people who probably heard me present wouldn't know that I'm freaking out inside, because I'm not an unconfident speaker. It's when I have a sort of a speech prepared that I want to say perfectly that I sort of fall apart, because now I'm terrified I'm going to like lose track of what I wanted to say. And so as a result, I've gotten more and more nervous, and I actually avoid I avoid presenting whenever I can, which is obviously the worst thing.
So I think that's very interesting. And actually, one of the things that I've found over time, and I agree, when I did the TEDx talk, I got so nervous, and of course, I worried afterwards about, I hadn't done it properly, etc. And actually, what I find very helpful, I don't know whether anyone else has had this experience, but I find it very helpful to visualize how I'm going to stand, what I'm going to say, etc., and to learn the first part. And I totally understand, Michelle, and I think that this visualization I found really, really helpful. I'm a bit of a sort of personal development program addict. I'm probably slightly too strong a word there, but now I found it incredibly helpful to do the visualization in the mind's eye. People like Tony Robbins, the personal development sort of guru, and Paul McKenna writes books on this too, about the power, neuro-linguistic programming, the power of visualization. So if you're going to make a speech, what I found quite useful is I visualize myself how I'm going to be standing, my eye contact, the first few sentences, how I'm going to hold my head, these things. And I fix that in my mind. And then actually there's a pressure point on my wrist that I tend to, I tend to use and press when I want to get back into that mode. The other thing I should say, by the way, is that I don't know if this is, so I use the thing called Rescue Remedy, which is a flower remedy, which is supposedly to comfort and reassure. And it's become a bit of a ritual for me. It's quite helpful, I find, to have a ritual. Tennis players, they have a ritual of ball bouncing. They've got those sort of things that tend to calm their mind and get them into the mode. So thank you very much for sharing that, Michelle. What about finances, financials, and things like that? Was anyone thinking, oh, gosh, I need to get to grips with that? Anyone happy to share the finance thing? Is that something that people are good at, feel confident at, or less so? Anyone happy to say something about this? Rescue drops right next to me. Yes, absolutely. Anyone in finance? Yes. Maybe someone is a financial professor on this call, or a professor of finance on this call. Anyone happy to share? Maybe in the chat. Maybe someone could say this in the chat about finance. Thank you for turning your camera on, Michelle. Actually, how do you feel about finance?
Sorry, I'm just going. I hate silence.
Yes.
I'm not high level. I don't have to deal with big financial statements, but I feel like for me, that's something I could learn. It's a skill. And it's something I can do on my own behind a closed door. And so there's much less, for me personally, there's not like a phobia about finance, whereas like standing on a stage in front of everyone, you like strip bare, whereas finance is just like a thing you can learn. But maybe that's just because I've never run a big company.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I was very struck by Professor Dame Mary Beard, who was surprised me by saying that she thought it was very important because she sat on boards of charities, and of course, on the board of a charity, you need to be able to recognise where you are going to be able to generate the most funds, and also you need reliable funding and you need reliable conversations here. And so therefore, actually, it was really important for her to be able to understand how the finances work so that she could help them. And it wasn't something that came naturally to her, and actually in part because girls and women tend to have less STEM, as in science, technology, engineering, mathematics subjects. They tend to take fewer of those subjects than guys tend to do. So that's been very useful. Anyone else want to mention this in the chat? Nabule.
Rita, I really hate finances, but as a leader, you are bound to work with the figures and with the finances, because when you are leading a team, or you are leading an entity, you've got to understand where to maybe apply for the funding. And even in your current space, you also need to understand how viable you are as an entity. Can you last maybe for the next 2, 3, 5 years? So it is important that like we do understand where our finances come from, and maybe not just enjoy like maybe that you're getting your salary at the end of the month, but like most importantly, where is that funding come from? So as the university, we are subsidized by government, but like as people in the space, like both academic and professional staff, we've got to work together to ensure that like the institution gets that funding that will sustain itself, so that like it continue to contribute to knowledge production.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for sharing. Lucy, how do you feel about the financial thing? How important has it been for you?
Rita, thank you. I think it's actually quite important. And I think for me, my job is actually increased in terms of financial responsibility. So, and it's for that reason that I decided to do an MBA when I already had another master's degree, because in the university, you tend to manage a lot of grants. Either those grants are coming from sponsors or they're coming from the Department of Higher Education. And one of the grants that I manage is actually approaching 100 million, So
yes.
If I'm dealing with those amounts of monies on behalf of the university, I need to understand finances. So then I did my MBA. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing that too. So it can be extremely helpful, and indeed actually really rather important, as indeed actually. And the profile thing is actually something that has cropped up on many occasions, actually women having the confidence to build profile. So all I'd say, I think, to people on the call is actually, building a profile, that's not about egotism, that's about helping you be as influential as you can. So choosing the platform, choosing the subject on which you're going to be expert, and then, obviously publishing, speaking, accepting engagements to speak and engage are always incredibly useful and important. So thank you for that. And just an interesting point of reflection, and maybe just collect some thoughts, sort of the participants on this call, about, maybe take a course, buy a book. I think actually, ironically, the last year and a half of seeing people mainly on screen, we've seen ourselves on screen. Actually, I think it's created a lot of awareness about, how we are speaking, how we're presenting ourselves, I know the first time I ever saw myself on video, it's a really, really good idea to video yourself speaking, even in a sort of small meeting or a small room. It's a really good idea to video yourself or watch yourself, because what I realized when I did that myself is that, you know, I would occasionally be looking up for inspiration, but that makes you look as though you're somehow away with, you know, whatever. If you look to the side, it looks as though you can't be trusted. So I learned how to look down. If I needed to think, I learned how to look down. So it's really good. And I noticed that I flap my arms a lot, you know, when I first started presenting. So it's really good to watch yourself on video, and just, you know, look at those things that, you know, if you were looking at yourself on a TV program or something, to really think about whether or not you can manage them and control them. So maybe go on an online presentation course. Anyway, some of these things might be just helpful prompts, so that actually, again, everyone on the call can make the very most. And I think actually, particularly when it comes to imposter syndrome, the communication things and the finance things, really important, because that gives you the confidence to have these broader conversations, and also the knowledge in addition to the specialist knowledge too. So I'm just going to speak for another 10 minutes or so, because I know that you wanted to take some time for Q&A and things at the end. So what I'll do is I'll start sharing the screen again. And there we are. Share. Okay. So if we were just to end up then on the leadership area, because I've talked about coherence and making sure your skills and how you present yourself will make the most out of your talents, your strengths, your goals, and everything else. And on the leadership front, one of the really important characteristics from an organizational point of view about leadership, and that's very closely correlated with sustainable success, is restlessness, is about innovation, is about setting the agenda, making sure that you're constantly developing your products and services and things like that. That's in an organization. When it comes to individuals, this sense of leadership about constantly making sure that you are curious about what's happening in the world, learning about the digital world, you know, learning also about, you know, how people are changing, how technology is changing, etc., how world situations are changing, but that sense of constantly, you know, refreshing your skills, and also, again, how you present yourself, I think is a really, really important thing. Constantly stretching yourself, which of course is correlated with the imposter syndrome, about making sure that you are, you know, doing more and moving forward, etc. I think I found this really fantastic quote of Albert Einstein, which is, "I'm neither clever or special, I'm only very, very curious," which actually seems to be very appropriate, you know, if one is in the academic as well as any other sector, which is actually, that is the thing that can give one real energy of moving on. And I think the minute we all feel that somehow we know everything and that, you know, we have no more to learn, I think then actually it's probably either time to give up, or otherwise, you know, go and get some help and also some support. I think that in terms of, you know, an amazing human being who I think is the epitome of a very strong personal brand and a great leader, is Jacinta Ardern. And it's interesting that there were conversations around how different world leaders have managed and coped with, you know, the pandemic, which of course has just been a tragedy. And obviously New Zealand is going to have challenges coming out of quarantine. But the thing about, the thing about Jacinta Ardern is that, you know, she's very clear about what she stands for. She talks a lot about being strong and kind. She refuses to accept when people say, you know, well, if kindness and niceness is somehow a weakness. Her real strength is about the combination of being strong and kind. And that shows up through what she does. So comforting people in terrible times. This is a woman who has got through earthquakes, terrorist attacks, volcanic eruptions, the pandemic, all while holding a baby. And she has managed to both have strong policies on you know, for example, the pandemic, and also has strong policies about the economy in New Zealand and dealings with other countries around the world, trading partners. She's strong in that, but also she is kind in the way that she deals with people. One of her ministers, who was the Minister for Health, he talked about when the pandemic first happened, he actually developed his own sense of imposter syndrome because he didn't know that they could deal with it. He didn't know how they were going to really tackle the pandemic in New Zealand. And did he feel himself up to it? Whereas, of course, Jacinda Ardern, with her leadership style, encouraged him. And of course, they worked on it together. So she's a strong and a kind leader. And one of the chapters in my book is called Nice Guys Don't Finish Last. And I think this is really important because sometimes I know there's a sense of, in order to get on to succeed, you've somehow got to be, if not the nasty person, then certainly not to pay attention to treating people well, being kind and nice to other people. And what I'd say to that is two things. Number one is not being nice these days, being, you know, nasty or bullying. That's becoming a very expensive thing, apart from really losing talent and losing connection, losing empathy, losing support amongst people. And there are a lot of business leaders, a lot of world leaders actually who have paid the price for being a bully. People don't want to work with you or help you. And if they feel they can get revenge one day, then they will do. And also, the world is a difficult enough place as it is. I think that we have an imperative to make our dealings with the outside world and dealings with each other and people as nice and supportive and kind as they can be. What goes around comes around. So I think that the other thing to say is purpose-led organizations, purpose-led individuals are the ones that tend to succeed in the long term. That creates sustainable relationships, whether it's with customers or audiences or friends or associates and everything else. So this is an incredibly important attribute, certainly in my experience, to get on and to succeed. So Jacinda Ardern, I think I'd nominate her for world president. I don't know what, but anyway, a new kind of leader is certainly, I think, what we're seeing with here. You may well have your own hero or heroine of people where you think, I really admire them as a leader, as a personal brand. They are clear about what they stand for, coherent in how that shows up in their behaviors, their skills. She's a great policymaker, for example, and also she is constantly trying to improve and to learn. And I'm very glad to say that I know a lot of people who are like that. So if I can now please ask to move to the final poll, which is, after all those conversations and things of that kind, do you feel that you could get to love your imposter a little bit more? Can we put up just the final poll, please? Very good. If I could just ask you maybe to fill that in. Do you think you could learn to love your imposter a bit more? As a definitely maybe. It's very good that we're going between these two. I think if people can keep on filling in, we've got a while to do, a moment to do. Some people are never going to get to like the imposter. But maybe one could just learn to go, actually, do you know, from time to time, I can use that feeling of, you know, can I do it to do more, practice more, learn new skills. Because sometimes, you know, learning these skills is the thing that gives you confidence to grow and to build your profile and to run things too. So great, thank you. Just another 5 minutes. Definitely maybe. Thank you. I'm going to end the poll and I'm then just going to end just on that. So I guess in summary, you know, I've certainly during some of the course of my working life learned to love my imposter a bit more and appreciate it and the drive that it can give, and also learned tools and techniques and things that I think are helpful, that do give you confidence, but confidence to be yourself. I mentioned earlier, I hate the advice, fake it to make it, because actually, in my view, making the most of yourself, understanding yourself, your strengths, your skills, getting clear about what it is that you want to do in the world, and then taking some active steps to gain the skills and the experiences that will enable you to get there, to think about how you communicate all that, is incredibly valuable. So be your best self, flaws and all, because we've all got flaws. And the vulnerabilities thing, you know, I think it can be very powerful to share with someone, look, I used to struggle with that. I hated presenting. I was nervous in order to do that. But sharing that about yourself and what you did to help it, I think is a real gift to help other people. We talked a lot about nurturing, supporting other people. You know, flaws and all, that's what makes us all human. And we need more human beings in charge of what's happening in the world, flaws and all. So thank you very much for listening to that. I think I'm going to stop sharing screen now, and I hope that we might have a conversation and some Q&A. Thank you. If you'd like to put some a Q&A on the chat, I'd be very happy to do that, or otherwise maybe we can facilitate it in some other way. But I hope that was at least stimulating in some way.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, Rita. So I don't know if there are questions, colleagues, that you would like to ask Rita after this lovely presentation. So I think we'll be happy. We have some time for Q&A. So let's use this time to ask Rita some questions, some clarity, points of clarity. Anything maybe that like you'd like to share, you maybe didn't get an opportunity to share it in terms of maybe either your first experience, maybe of imposter syndrome. So anything, colleagues, I think we'll really love that engagement at this time. While you wait for that. Okay, you can go, Rita.
Or did anything that surprised you that came up during the course of that conversation? Anything that you thought, actually, I haven't quite thought about it like that before, or I haven't actually shared that? And thank you very much for that comment. Switch on your cameras. So there we are, shared result. Definitely, maybe. I'm so glad that you feel that you may be able to love your imposter a little bit more. Concept of love your imposter. The young. I can't say that. Jungian. Is that right? Is that how I say it? Aliyah. Hello.
Hello. Thank
hello.
You. Yes.
Aliyah, thank you for this.
So
that's really interesting. Pardon?
I said I can't put on my video because of connectivity issues.
Okay.
Yes, it is it reminds me of the Jungian concept of the shadow side and really embracing your shadow side and becoming more aware of it, and that helps to strengthen it. But I did have an additional question as well of 2 articles around the imposter syndrome that I recently read, and both in the HBR. And they talk about the imposter syndrome, particularly as it speaks to women and possibly pathologizing women, much like the hysteria syndrome pathologized women back in the 1900s, right up into the early 20th century. And that does not take into consideration the intersections of historical intersections, really, of race and gender, etc. And in much like this context in South Africa, and the university is a good space where it's evident, there are many more women, and particularly women of color, who are rising in rank in the spaces, and those intersections are more likely to contribute to feelings of a lack of self-confidence, because the spaces haven't always been previously created, and women are really breaking new ground and getting into different positions in a very male-dominated space. And we have the whole history of patriarchy that happens, and we see it as we try to negotiate, I think, cultural issues as well as race and gender. So I was wondering what your thoughts were after that long story.
No, that's really,
around,
yes, pathologizing.
around the pathologizing of women or persons in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very thoughtful and thought-provoking conversation. I have a couple of thoughts on this. Number one is that when I talk about being able to do work on yourself, I think this is also in parallel with clearly the work that we need to do at an institutional level. And I'm sort of taking that as read. We all must make, keep up the pressure on institutional bias and all of the structural barriers that we experience in getting to run things or to, you know, build profile, be as influential as we can be. And there are many associations, there are many high profile champions and advocates of that, whom we should all support. So there are structural issues. There's a lot of conversations about flexibility now, as we know, in many sort of parts of the working world, which is very good in some ways. However, we do need clearly to make sure that, you know, flexibility doesn't mean, well, of course, it's going to be mainly mothers who take that up. And so somehow you won't be able to end up running an organization if you want flexible work. I think that, you know, the conversations we're having now are powerful conversations. And also the fact that we now learn that we can run organizations, you know, from a screen. We don't have to be in the room, present at an office or in a building at any one time to do it. So I'm going to take that. There are clearly, what I'm talking about today, I guess, is the thing that we can do for ourselves that actually can give confidence. So if you like, we're approaching it from two angles, the structural piece and also the personal confidence piece. And I think on the pathologizing, number one is it's really important. I mean, I have to be speaking to a group of people who I think just about everyone on the call is female today. I think that's right, isn't it? Yes. So I think that women do experience this more than men, but I've spoken to a lot of men who also experience imposter syndrome, and in some ways it's worse for them because science studies will talk about testosterone being the confidence hormone, which actually can make some men feel overconfident. And so therefore, when they don't achieve things that they think they should be doing and the society expects them to achieve, that's even more crushing. So they find it even more difficult to deal with. So whereas women tend to find it easier to share some of these thoughts. And so therefore, actually with sharing them sometimes can become, it can be more therapeutic. So I think it's very important for us to talk about how this is something that's experienced by both men and women and also by very high profile people. So it stops becoming a problem that just affects certain people and starts becoming a normal part of the human condition, because 70% of people is a very, very high percentage of people. It almost ceases to be a syndrome and starts to feel more like a normal part of being a human being, to have some of these feelings, etc. I think the third thing I'd say on the non-pathologizing is actually for us to own it and acknowledge it, to say, actually, yes, it is something that I've experienced. And what I also know is 70% of people, these very high profile people, also experience it. It's a really normal thing. And what's more, it can help people achieve more. So rather than it being pathologized almost into this is what people who are victims, it's rather more actually, this is what gives me strength, and being honest and open about it, as opposed to someone somehow telling you that you've got it, or otherwise, talking about people with imposter syndrome as though they're the third party. So I don't know if that sort of helps at all, but thank you very much for stimulating that conversation. I know someone had their hand up a moment ago. It might have gone down.
There was a hand, Rita, from Dr. Tele. Dr. Tele, would you like to come in?
Thank you. Rita, because of my experience in the academia, I find it strange that I become more powerful emotionally, and I experience more strength from what I do outside the academia. But what I have also learned is that the confidence that I have gained from things that I do outside the academia have kind of channeled my confidence into what I'm doing in the academia. For example, I am a preacher. I am a trained preacher. I'm also a lay minister. And before COVID, I used to play bass guitar as part of a band in Durban. I know it sounds crazy, but you know, nothing in the world makes me happier than the things that I do outside the academia. But what I find strange is that I'm able to draw from that confidence and build my own emotional survival in the academia. Is that normal, Rita?
Thank you so much. What a brilliant story. And I think, you know, this is an absolutely brilliant example of, you know, doing things that you love is an extra thing, an extra passion in your life. And actually things that you're learning there to bring those in to one's, you know, to your daily life. And what I'd like to say is all those years when I cared passionately about the environment and wildlife, at that time, it was weird to talk about that stuff in business. People thought you were a hippie communist or something if you talked about your love for the environment and sustainability. Whereas suddenly people start going, actually, this is quite important. So I was able to bring my knowledge of that into my working life, and actually it became a special extra skill that I had. So I think what's really interesting about what you said, the things that give you joy, and there'll be some themes about what give you, I mean, I love the idea of you playing guitar, and I'm sure being a lay preacher, you've learned how to be a fantastic communicator as well, and bringing that into the academic environment will make you you know, I'm sure what you do is extraordinary and very special. So that's a really great learning, isn't it, about making sure you're doing other things in your life that actually you can bring you know, into working life too. Thank you so much for that. Lucy, I think
let's bring Lebo Hilemo-Letsane on board. She has been writing a lot on the chat, but like I think she can say something at the moment. Lebo?
Thank you.
No, Buhle, no, I actually didn't want to say anything. I was just agreeing with Noctura that I enjoy more being out there than being at the university. And for me, I get UKZN to pay me to work in the rural communities. That's all that I was saying. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lebo.
Thank you. And Busi, you were talking about working with the imposter goes with real gentleness and kindness to self. And I think that's a really interesting insight there. We can all be a bit brutal to ourselves. And I think that kindness thing, that niceness and kindness absolutely needs to apply to yourself. And you know, that thing I mentioned about being CEO and realizing that actually I didn't want to be the kind of butt-kicking chief executive. I wanted to be a nurturing chief executive, and that was more natural to me. That was being kind to myself, to go, actually, I like that part of me. I like that aspect, and actually I want to make the most of that, as opposed to, and there's a great saying about be yourself because you'll never be as good at trying to be someone else, which I thought was really good. And that's why the sort of be your best self, flaws and all came up as a thing. Yes.
There is a question from Zandile. How can you tell it's imposter syndrome versus confidence issues versus low self-esteem? How do you know if you need help?
Well, I think this is a really interesting one. And actually, there isn't much distinction between these things. And in fact, a lot of people who have low self-esteem are most likely to say, I can't do that. And again, you know, if you are invited to do something, you go, you can't mean me, and you probably need someone with more experience. So these things are very correlated. Although, as I said, I think that there is a spectrum that out of the 70% of people who say that they experience this, around 10% will have quite, you know, they'll find it rather incapacitating. And so therefore, if people do experience imposter syndrome to the degree that it's incapacitating, because they also have low self-esteem and maybe don't have the energy or the drive that actually enables them to use the drive as opposed to be crushed by it. And I think this is very interesting. And talking to people within families, parents will say, we brought our children up in the same way, etc. Or otherwise parents get divorced or split up or lose a parent or whatever. And one of the children can be absolutely crushed by it, and the other one actually can go, actually, no, I'm going to use this as a drive. So clearly people respond to different circumstances in different ways. And if the low self-esteem and the anxiety and so on is incapacitating, that's clearly something that one needs to get professional help about. So, one can't I can't obviously make a judgment on any individual case, apart from changing the mindset around imposter syndrome. That's a really important mindset change, a little bit as it is with neuro-linguistic programming, visualization, putting yourself into a stronger frame of mind through the way you use your physiology, a mindset. So if you struggle to do that, if people do struggle to do that, and they're still in a sort of a dark place when it comes to self-esteem and can't step out of it, that is a time of actually getting some professional help. But these things are very correlated, as indeed are things like anxiety dreams. I don't know about anybody else. The anxiety dreams I have over the years, when it comes to the academic world, for example, for some reason I always think I haven't actually completed my finals, or I have to go back and take my exams again, and then I haven't revised and I can't find my books, and all those sort of anxiety dreams. And actually, there's a really interesting academic study based in France, where a French professor looked at French students and analysed those that tend to have a lot of anxiety dreams, both leading up to and the night before exams. And what they found was that those actually who had the most anxiety dreams tended to be the ones who achieved more, which I thought was a really, really interesting study. So, clearly there is something going on here about the drive and the hunger. And then, of course, it's about keeping it under control and making sure that you are making most of yourself in what you're trying to achieve and to build, and how you're going to move on, as opposed to this sort of, well, how should I be? This artificial construct that, for the reasons I've described, can make you either miserable or ill.
Rita, I think in terms of time in our program now, we need to move to the next stage now, which will be the vote of thanks. Let me thank you very, very much for the engaging talk, the inspiring talk that you have given us today. But like the person who's going to do that is Professor Miriam Sidat. I'm now going to hand over to Miriam to do the vote of thanks. Thank you so much, Rita and colleagues. Thank you.
Hi, colleagues. Thank you, Rita, for such an informative session. I think we could have all sat here for many more hours. I can already see Busi's brain working and the wheels turning for a follow-up session via Imbokodo. So firstly, I'd like to thank you, Rita. It's just been a remarkable session. I think it's been very cathartic for all of us here. Your team that works beside you and with you, thank you to them. Our participants, our women leaders in the academy, colleagues at UKZN, our amazing facilitator, Professor Nobushle Shongwa, Dr. Mazibuko, and of course, the behind the scenes people that make all of this possible. The Pamela Adams, Norma Zondo from Corporate Affairs, the ICS team, without whom we would be staring into blank screens. Musa and Tuli, thank you. And Kurt Conning, I'm sorry if we pressed the wrong buttons and messed up your breakaway rooms, but we take full responsibility for that. Ms. Nondumiso Ludla, your administrative support provides the engine for Imbokodo initiatives. And our very own race car driver, Miss Busi Ramabodu, and I refer to her as a race car driver because every initiative, she's front and center, driving it behind the scenes, working after hours. Thank you, Busi. We acknowledge your sacrifice and your leadership role and the changes that we're seeing you make in HR, and also your role as driver of the Imbokodo Steering Committee. So thank you, colleagues, and we'd love to have more of these, and let's flip the narrative, and let's encourage and build partnerships among women, with women, for women. And that way, I personally won't have to learn to count and we can leave that to our financial experts. So thank you for your time. We understand it's very busy, and have a lovely week. Thank you, colleagues.
And thank you. It's been a joy working with everybody and great to see you. Thank you so much for inviting me today. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rita. Thank you very, very much, colleagues. This was our last webinar, colleagues, for Imbokodo for the year. So we will hope to plan more of these in the next year, 2022. Thank you very, very much, colleagues. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Rita. Bye.
Thank you, Mariam.
Thank you, Busi.
Yeah, no.
Do we need to stay on?
We may just need to stay on just for a brief reflection, but I see Nobuhle is gone.
Hi, Busi. Sorry, we're just taking a pic off the screen. Sorry, of everyone on the screen.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it went off very well. And
are we still live on YouTube?
Are we still live?
Yeah, we're gonna just stop the recording now.
YouTube, yeah.